This kind of question we got from Nosepo, we got from Marlon, but we chose Jessica's. In fact, Mbali chose Jessica's. Okay, so we went with Jessica's, otherwise we're going to be answering exactly the same question because they literally were touch and go the same questions. So, which tells you that if so many people are sending them and they found it from different sources, it's actually quite an important question. So here we go. It says, study the diagram of a reflex arc below. Now, you have to understand the following. The central nervous system is made up of the spine, okay, spinal cord, and the brain. So the brain and the spinal cord are central to the nervous system. Everything has to go to the brain. So it goes from the peripheral nervous system to the spinal cord and up to the brain. The brain will then interpret what is going on and then cause a reaction. Like, for example, when I explained to you about Bobby last night and his gases. It's that process. My brain had time to think about it because my body wasn't being harmed. However, when you stand a chance of being hurt, so you hear a snake, or you put your hand down on, even hearing a snake is still, you're going to work with adrenaline. Okay, but if I don't know I've left the oven on, the stove on, and I put my hand down on that hot plate. Now imagine, my brain has to, the sensor, all the little the receptors in my hand are going to be burning like crazy, okay? And then they've got to convert the stimulus, those receptors, convert the stimulus into an impulse. And the impulse goes along the sensory neuron to the spinal cord, to a connector neuron, and jiggy, 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 jiggy to the brain. And the brain's going to say, sure, that is so. And then the brain has to then send a message via the motor neuron or multipolar neuron, jiggy, diggy, 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 diggy down, and then all along the arm and cause these muscles to contract to move my hand away. By then, I've got like 500-degree burns on my hand, which is stupid. It's like, are you mad? But the body says, we can't rely on how long it takes for things to go all the way to the brain, for the brain to sort it out, and then for the brain to respond. So we've got two pathways. We've got, there's the brain, okay? And the brain is the one that sorts it all out. So this is where you process what you are picking up with your senses. Remember, that happens in the cerebrum. And here's your spinal cord. All right, now, if my hand is here, oh man, let me just quickly do that. Okay, so there's a little handy. All right, now, if I stroke a kitty cat, here's the cat. And the cat is sitting here nicely, purring nicely, and I stroke the cat. That sensation that gets picked up here by the receptors in my skin is going to convert the stimulus to an impulse, and that impulse is going to go along a sensory neuron all the way to the spinal cord, and then go to the brain. And I'm going to get this wonderful warm feeling, and my arm is going to carry on stroking the kitty cat. Okay, that's normal. But now I need my arm to, so what happens here is my brain's going to say, I want to carry on stroking the kitty cat. So this will be the motor neurons. And the motor neuron takes messages away from the brain and to the muscles so that I keep on stroking the cat. That's normal, okay? But now we have a situation. What color are we going to use here? Here is a pin, okay? And I accidentally put my hand on this pin. It is pain. So the pain receptors here are going to say, ah, pain receptors convert the stimulus to an impulse, and the impulse, okay, here's the pin, and we have pain. So pain stimulus. And that pain stimulus goes, let's do another color, all the way to the spinal cord, and it goes connector neuron. And then from the connector neuron, are we going to see black on here? Let's do red. From the connector neuron, it goes, and it makes these muscles contract, and this is still the motor neuron. And this one in the blue was still the sensory neuron. But what happens here is I have a connector neuron, and it says, this is like a short circuit. No. We are not going to suffer like that. We need to get this hand to lift away very quickly. So this is a reflex action. This path is a reflex arc. Okay. Why does it happen? Because it is going to be a quick or a rapid. The definition in most textbooks is a rapid, involuntary or automatic response, okay, from a stimulus that is external, or from an external stimulus, or as a response to an external stimulus. Why? To protect the body. Because we don't want the whole pin to go through our hand. We want to remove it from the pain. So it is a rapid, involuntary reaction to an external stimulus to protect the body. Okay, now, here's our diagram. Oh, my lordy. Okay, people, here we go. Okay, I'm going to do a slight, Jessica, a very slight modification here, but we've got sort of a butterfly here like that. Okay, and there's a column there, and this one has got gray matter. Remember, in the brain, the cortex is on the outside, has all the cell bodies, and it is gray matter. And on the inside, in the medulla, we have white matter in the brain. Okay, here it's slightly different. So here we go, zhup, 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 and it does. Okay, and then I'm only going to do one side, okay, and this side does exactly the same. Right, this is your spinal cord. So what I've done, let me see. Okay, here I've got a little, here I've got my water bottle, okay? This is your spinal cord. What you are looking at is if I cut it like this, ka-chinks, and I look at it like that. So I'm looking at a cross-section through the spinal cord. All right. Now, this is what I'm going to see. So I'm looking into the spinal cord. The next time you have a chicken, okay, a whole chicken, please, so you must have the whole chicken. I want you to take a very sharp knife, and I want you to cut through the middle of that chicken this way. So the head is on this side and the tail is on that side. And I want you to have a look at what you see there. You'll find the bones, and then you'll find the spinal cord on the inside. Please do it before you cook it. Okay, and you'll be able to see exactly what we see here. All right, you will, I promise. Okay, now, what we've got here, so this goes like that. Okay, there is the cell body. Okay, here is a block, and this is, it's got little cells. Okay, and this here looks like this, and this one. Okay, now our labels. I must draw these quickly. This goes, oh man, this goes here. This goes here like this. It goes, let me do another color. This goes here. I definitely need arty guys to draw this for me. They can do a whole bunch of drawings. Okay, and then we go zip, 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 zip. And when it goes into here, this is the dorsal. Okay, just while I'm remembering now, dorsal is at the back, ventral is your tummy. Okay, so think of fish. Fish have a dorsal fin. That's that big fin on the back of its back. So your dorsal side is always on the back, the ventral on the front. I know that the IEB learners must know that it goes through the dorsal root and then it goes out through the ventral root. So all you have to remember is dorsal is at the back, ventral is at the front. And your impulses will always go from the receptor via the sensory neuron or the unipolar neuron in through the dorsal side of the spine, and then if it's a reflex action or reflex arc, out through the ventral side. So, all right. So here, and then we have a terminal end plate, and then we have another little cell body here, and it goes jiggy, jiggy, jiggy around here with another terminal end plate, another one here, and this one goes out through the ventral horn and travels to here to this structure. So, all right, our labels are A, B, and C, and D. So D is going to this structure here. So between the two, there. Man, we need a different guy. Let's do it like that. So there's the arrow. It's this area between the two. Alrighty. And it says this is a diagram of a reflex arc. Okay. Remember, the reflex arc is the path the impulse is going to travel. Reflex action is the reaction, which is a rapid, involuntary reaction or response to a external stimulus to protect the body. Okay, and the first question is, what is a reflex action? So one, I'm going to write here, reflex action. Please make sure you know this. They ask it in every single exam. Okay. Reflex action is a rapid, involuntary. So you've got no choice. It's an involuntary. You can also say automatic. So involuntary, automatic response to an external stimulus. Okay. And why? Because you want to protect your body. You want to protect it. You want to make sure it isn't harmed, it isn't hurt. Okay, like for example, you walk, we're going to do the eye next week. So you walk outside and the light is incredibly bright. the first thing is going to happen is you're going to close your eyes, but at the same time, your pupil is going to constrict. Okay, why? It was to allow less light in. So it constricts to like a little pinpoint. That is a reflex action. Okay, it's involuntary and automatic. Right, question 2. Question 2, label the following. The functional connection at D, so that connection, the connection at D is called a synapse. Okay. Synapse. Okay, so synapse. And then was A and B, the neuron B. So this neuron here is your connector neuron. So let's quickly just do these labels first. I'm going to do it in yellow. Okay, A is your sensory neuron. Okay, sensory neuron, how do we know? Because there is a unipolar cell body. So that's the cell body, and it is unipolar. It looks like this, goes chung, chung, chung. Okay, so that's a sensory neuron. B, this one in the middle, is your connector neuron. You can also call a connector neuron an interneuron. Inter means between. So it's your between neuron. So either both make sense. Connector, because it connects the sensory neuron to the motor neuron, or you can say it is an interneuron. It is between the two, because inter means between. All right, so your connector neuron, both are correct. It depends on what textbook you're using and what your teacher trained with. Okay, D is your synapse, which I never wrote in here. Okay, and C is your motor neuron. Okay, and remember your motor neuron is multipolar, but even though they haven't drawn it as multipolar here. Okay, so neuron B, we're answering our questions. Neuron B would be the B is the connector neuron. Or you can call it an interneuron, the between neuron. All right, then question 3. State the significance of the functional connection at D. Now, if you think about, okay, people, if we do what a synapse is, you've got the end of the terminal end plate, so those synaptic knobs at the end of the terminal end plate of the one neuron, okay? And you've got the dendrites of the next neuron, all right? But they can't touch, because remember, if those neurons touched, so those terminal plates touched, dendrites and terminal plates touched, it means that the impulse could travel backwards and forwards, and there would just be no stopping, which would cause a person to shake. You would just shake all the time, very much like people that have Parkinson's disease. Because what happens is that you've got this neurotransmitter, and the neurotransmitter is like a little ball, a little guy throwing a ball. So think of it this way. Here you've got the end of one neuron. So this is neuron 1, and the impulse is traveling in this direction. And on this side, you have got neuron 2. So in this case, and the guys aren't flicking to my board, so I'm not sure why. Here's neuron 1. Okay, so the impulse is, so this is your sensory neuron. And this one here is your connector neuron. All right, so impulse traveling here. So think of little guys, and these little guys have got balls, and they're throwing the balls across here. The ball is equal to your impulse. So, and the little boy is your neurotransmitter. One of the neurotransmitters would be acetylcholine. All right. So, and on this side here, you've got the ball gets here, and then the ball carries on going, which would be your impulse again. All right. So that little ball, little guys, lots of little guys, lots of little neurotransmitters, and they take the ball and they chuck it across this gap. Take the ball and they chuck it across the gap. There's no way that this ball can come back this way. And that is how the synapse controls the movement, first of all, of your impulses. It ensures that the impulses travel in one direction only, and you can get impulses coming from 2 or 3 neurons, okay, and then going along through one connector neuron. So your synapse controls the path, literally, of the impulse. And that is why it is very, very, very relevant. So when it says state the significance of the functional unit at D, let me get some space here. We're going to do it here. Okay, so we want the you must know this. Okay, it's important. Significance of the synapse. Okay, that significance is because it ensures impulse move in one direction. They don't just go backwards, forwards, sideways, everywhere. One direction only, okay? Only one direction. That's number one. Number two, it prevents neurons being overstimulated. Could also say continually stimulated, but overstimulated. Why? Because the neuron, and then it's got to wait for the at least for the neurotransmitters to actually pass the impulse over this gap. This here is your synaptic gap. Okay. What's the third one? Oh, it ensures impulse is transmitted from a sensory neuron to a connector neuron. Or you can say to a motor neuron. Okay, it would depend on where it is. All right, so you've always got that process happening. It makes sure that that the process of the neurons was always kept constant. It would be like you driving on the main highway, on the M1, okay, and you tunneling along, and the next thing you've got a bus and another car and 500 other cars and another 10 buses all coming at you in your section of the highway. You're thinking, what? No. If you want to go to the other side of the highway, so you want to travel back again, what must you do? You have to wait till you get to an off-ramp. And your off-ramp is your connector neuron. So think of your sensory neuron travels to the brain. Look, they say all roads lead to Gauteng. I mean, like, what can I say, people? And it's not because I'm being biased, it's Gauteng. All right? So let's say from Pretoria. So you're sitting on the M1 and you're traveling to Joburg. All right? And you can't just turn and drive across the highway. You have to wait until you get to an off-ramp. That's your connector neuron. And the connector neuron puts you back on the highway, back to Pretoria. So that is the way it works. Just think of one big highway. Alrighty, next question. Where am I? Losing all my pages here. And it says, write down the correct order, the letters only, of the neurons involved from the time of a stimulus is received until a response takes place. Okay, so we're going to do it like this. Okay, so Oh, by the way, this is your receptor. That's going to be whatever sense organ. And this is your effector. It's what is affected. And your effector will always be a muscle, which is what you see here. And I'm going to put here also glands. So whatever they draw here doesn't matter. It's your effector. It's what is affected. Okay, let's get another color. Okay, so the letters that take place, we're going to have, first of all, we're going to have the receptor, and then we're going to have A, which is the sensory neuron. So it's going to go beep, 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 sensory neuron. And the impulse is going to travel through the sensory neuron, through the dorsal root, and we're going to have a synapse between the terminal plate of the sensory neuron and the dendrites of the connector neuron. So the connector neuron is to be, all right? And then it goes through D. Don't forget the synapse here. It's because it's labeled D. And then it travels along C to the receptor. So what have we got? We've got, okay, let's see, what was it? CBDC. So question 4 is CBD. No, man, was that right? It was ABDC. ABDC. That's your order. So think of it this way. You are always going to go sensory organ, whether it's the skin, whatever, the sensory organ and sense cells, okay? And they are going to be inside in the receptor. Okay, so it goes from the receptor to the sensory, this is the impulse, sensory neuron. Okay, and sensory neuron, it goes to the connector neuron. Connector neuron, and every time you're going to have a synapse, so there will be a synapse there, and then to the connector neuron, to the motor neuron, and there's going to be a synapse here, all right? And then the motor neuron goes to the effector, and the effector in this case is a muscle. And it will then cause the muscle to contract or respond in some way. Okay, so our letters A, B, D, C. Explain the consequences for a reflex action if neuron C is damaged. Now, go back here. If neuron C is damaged, C is the motor neuron. And if this neuron is damaged, what's going to happen? We're not going to get, if it's damaged anywhere along here, we're not going to get that impulse to the effector to make the muscle contract, which means the person will be able to feel the sensation through the sensory neurons, but they will not be able to respond to the stimulus because the motor neuron will not be able to make the muscles contract. Okay, and then draw a labeled diagram to represent the structure of a neuron A. Neuron, oh, it's a unipolar neuron. I was going to say we've done that, but okay, it's the unipolar neuron. So let's quickly do a unipolar neuron. Here we go. Okay, people, you must know these structures. So, by the way, Mbali said, she's left a note here, and she says, Giccini also wanted the labels for a unipolar neuron or a sensory neuron. So, Giccini, this is for you, hun. All right, so make sure that this, okay, so I'm going to do, first of all, always put a heading, okay, because you always get a mark for the caption or the heading, and you write here sensory neuron. Just also remember that a sensory neuron can also be also a unipolar neuron, or you can also call it a afferent. Afferent. Okay. So there's your sensory neuron. Now we've got our caption or our heading. They always give a mark for that. So, I mean, for heaven's sake, they're asking you to draw that neuron, so label it. I mean, for heaven's sake, you've got the mark there. All right, so that's, oops, 1 mark. All righty, now what have we got? We've got this. It's unipolar. Unipolar means 1. So it's only got 1 pole. So there it is. There's the pole. Ching, ching, ching. All right. Okay, there's your axon, and then all the way around here, you've got your little Schwann cells with the myelin sheaths. Okay, and blop, blop, blop. Okay, there's the cell body nucleus. There's your axon. Let's just make our axon a bit thicker, so you can see it nicely. Okay, and then this side with our little synaptic bulbs here. And on this side, all right. You can also include, let's say that the impulse is, this is the direction of impulse. Okay, so here we would have possibly a connector neuron. Okay, yeah. So I'm just doing it like this so that it's just so that you know. That's why that it travels in this direction, which means that over here on this side, here we would have a receptor. Okay, and that receptor would be any of your senses. So eyes, ears, nose, taste for tongue, hands, skin. You know your skin is your biggest organ in your body. Okay, so there's your receptor. And these little guys are going to now be connected to the receptor so that the receptor is going to convert stimulus to an impulse. And then that impulse is going to go along the axon and connect to a connector neuron. Alrighty, let's label. This would be a dendrite. Okay, this would be the cell body. And that would be a nucleus. Oh, you can also say that's cytoplasm. Okay, axon. And maybe do it like that so that it's clear what you're pointing to. And that membrane on each one here would be the myelin sheath. And remember the function of the myelin sheath? What is it? It was to insulate the axon, all right, or the nerve, insulate the axon and accelerate the impulse. And I think that's it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 labels. So, and this question was 5 marks. So it was only 5 marks. So they would have given you 1 for the caption, and then they would have given you for any of those labels. So you would have got 4 for the labels. They may also have given you an extra 1 mark, or so 1 for the caption, 1 for the accuracy of the diagram, that you drew a unipolar, and you would have got one for at least 3 for any of the 3 labels. Please remember that those Schwann cells, the outer membrane, okay, is your myelin sheath. And it's that myelin sheath that makes, that protects. In your spinal cord, okay, those neurons don't have a myelin sheath, and that is why they cannot repair themselves. And yeah, it causes huge issues. Alrighty, now, thank you for sending your question, Jessica. Here's one. This came from Alpheus, and it's also a reflex action. But what they've got here is the finger is being stuck with a steel nail. So if we go back to our one here, I'm not going to redraw this, but here your receptor, okay, is a nail. Right, so it's going to be pretty much the same process. And it says, explain the purpose of a reflex action. So what would the purpose of a reflex action be, people? It is going to be so that you can protect the body. So it is a rapid, automatic or involuntary response, okay, to an external stimulus in order to protect the body. Okay, so that's the purpose. Then it says, give the letter and name of the part that conducts nerve impulses from the sensory neuron to the motor neuron. Oh, it's the connector neuron. We've got that already. Response to the stimulus. What's going to respond to the stimulus? Here, look. What responds to the stimulus? It's the effector. And in this case, the effector was D. Okay, then it says, give 2 reasons why a synapse is important. Well, there we go. You see what I'm saying, people? The same things come up in the questions. So it ensures impulses move in one direction. This is its main. It is the most important function of the lot. Okay, and then it prevents the neurons from being overstimulated, transmitted from sensory neurons to a connector neuron. I mean, these 2 are not really that great. It's this one here that is incredibly important. Then it says, describe the reflex action taking place. Okay, now, let's write it. Okay, so we're going to do a reflex action. We've got some time. Reflex action. Okay. So what did we have here? We had a finger plus a nail. All right. So first thing that you're going to say, number 1, all right, is the sensory neurons. Oh, man, no. The sensory cells for pain receive the stimulus from the finger being pricked. Okay, that's the first thing. So finger pricked, ana. Right. So what happens then? Okay, though that stimulus, the stimulus, because the stimulus can't go to your nervous system. The stimulus is converted to an impulse. All right, that's important. And then 3, the impulse travels along the sensory neuron. Okay, so we're going to receive the stimulus when the finger is pricked. Then that stimulus is converted to an impulse, and the impulse travels along the sensory neuron. So this is where your marks are. Okay, then 4. the sensory neuron forms a synapse with a connector neuron. Okay. So, sensory neuron, synapse, connector neuron. And then the connector neuron forms a synapse with the motor neuron. All right, let's just leave it here. Okay, so we're going to go receives, pricked, impulse is converted to a stimulus converted to an impulse. Impulse travels along the sensory neuron, forms a synapse with a connector neuron, so it's passed on. Connector neuron forms a synapse with the motor neuron, okay? And then, lastly, the motor neuron, not the motor neuron, the stimulus passes through the motor neuron to the effector. Which is the muscle and causes it to contract, to remove the finger from the nail. Okay, so the stimulus passes through the motor neuron to the effector, and then the effector contracts to remove the finger from the nail. Now, people, it doesn't mean that the brain doesn't get the message. In this case, you're going to have two processes. You're going to have your reflex action, all right, the prick, sensory neuron, impulse travels to the spinal cord, synapse with a connector neuron, synapse with a motor neuron, and then the motor neuron cruises down, the impulse, and it causes the muscles to contract. And only when your finger is being pulled away do you think, wow, that was so, and you go, and you suck your finger and you rub it and you do whatever the other things that are that you do with it. Okay, all of those were subsequent reactions. And those reactions are because at the same time as that impulse is now on its way to remove your hand away from the painful stimulus, is now traveling along the motor neuron. You've got another sensory neuron that's now taking it to the brain. Your brain is going to perceive the pain, and your brain is then going to do all the other things like you will only know from experience to put your finger in your mouth and suck it and wet it and try and get the pain away. A baby doesn't do that. So the best way to think about what is a reflex and a reflex action and what is a learned reaction, okay, is think about whether a newborn baby will be able to do it or whether only adults or children that are older than a baby can do it. So, for example, hiccuping is a reflex because a newborn baby hiccups. A newborn baby is able will pull their hand away from a painful stimulus. A newborn baby will swallow when something is in its throat or cough. If you take a torch and you shine a torch into a newborn baby's eyes, the pupils will constrict. So all of the things that a newborn baby will if you think of a newborn baby, will it react in that way? Then it is a reflex action. okay, and not a learned response. A newborn baby is not going to run away from a snake. Okay, we've learned to be scared of a snake. So if you hear a snake, see a snake, you are going to think, whoa, and you are going to boot it out of there because it is a learned response. Don't confuse a reflex action with a learned reflex. A good cricket player may have incredible, what we call reflexes, because they've learned to catch a ball very quickly. They respond very quickly.